Hello there.
Hi.
Friends, lovers, thank you for joining us. This is 5 Minutes with Robert and Amy Nasir, and we are glad you are here. Today is October 9th. October 9th, the month of Halloween. So close, and yet so close. Thank you for joining us. We're glad you're here, and we are looking for you in the chat. We already see Robin on the YouTube side of things. Let me just get my Facebook feed up as well. Make sure that I'm not missing the chat this time. Well, Facebook's being a little wonky. We'll do a refresh there, but thank you for joining us. Today is October 9th, and let's see, this is the 282nd day. 282nd day of this, your best year yet. Has 2022 been your best year yet? If not, we've got a few tips to maybe help make that happen tonight. You've got 83 days left to make that happen, 77 days until Christmas, 22 days left until Halloween. And we are ready. We are geared up. I am ready to do Halloween. Well, I'm not ready. Amy is ready.
I'm ready.
You got to get pictures posted. Amy has made our front yard
beautiful.
Halloween-tastic. Better than ever, I think. This really is your best yet.
Thank you very, very much. You know, I worked really hard on the outdoor decorations. I've got some indoor decorations still to do, but that's going to get done, and it's going to be great.
Outstanding. On this date, speaking of Halloween, speaking of horror stories, this is the date, well, bad news, good news. This is the date on which Che Guevara was executed. That's right. On this day, Che Guevara assumed room temperature. It's the craziest thing because you still see people wearing kids. We always say kids, but it ain't just the kids wearing Che Guevara shirts, as if this horrible revolutionary who worked with Fidel Castro is some kind of hero. So today we celebrate, he was killed, he was executed, gone, slit their throat, and no more Che Guevara. If you've got a Che shirt, I hope you're wearing it. Actually, I just hope you're not wearing it. More important than that, it's also the birth date of John Lennon, born in 1940. Sadly, only lived to be 40 years old. Passed away, was killed, murdered in 1980, but today is his birthday. Da-da-da-da-da-da. You say it's his birthday, and we are celebrating that today. It's also the birthday of Sean Ono Lennon. That's right, his second son was born on the same day he was. Exactly 35 years on John Lennon's 35th birthday, and that is super cool. And we're going to talk about John Lennon, but first, it's also John Entwistle's birthday. Sadly, we lost him in 2002, so his birth date. But tell me in the chat your favorite songs that John Entwistle played on, and that means just about anything by The Who. Personally, Quadrophenia, just about anything on the Quadrophenia album is still my favorite. I still find Tommy too spooky. Maybe for Halloween that's appropriate, but we do wish, rest in peace, a happy birthday to the late John Entwistle. It is also, and this came up in conversation recently, Sharon Osbourne's birthday. Mm-hmm. Sharon Osbourne is 70 years old, still looking fabulous. She was not only, obviously, as you know, the wife of Ozzy Osbourne, but really the one who made the reality show The Osbournes happen and gave Ozzy Osbourne his third wind, his third career, after being the Black Sabbath lead vocalist and then having a great solo career, especially in the 1980s, and then the star of the Osbournes. And he became not just a singer, but he always was kind of a personality, but a celebrity. Very cool. Happy birthday. Happy 70th birthday, Sharon Osbourne. One more birthday. It's Tony Shalhoub's birthday. Has anybody been watching The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and are you looking forward to season 4? I don't know. We're having mixed reactions. Season 1 was perfection.
Chef's kiss.
Magnificent. Couldn't have been better. Season 2 of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel was mixed, and season 3 seemed to have lost the thread.
Yeah.
I understand what they're trying to do, and
Is
they
there
don't.
Season 4?
There will be.
Oh.
So, yes. Are you looking forward to season 4 of that?
Well, now, going back into the birthdays,
yes.
There is actually a photo of John Lennon and Che Guevara playing guitar with each other.
Yes, don't believe it.
Don't believe it. It's actually false. It's altered. It's
Yes.
an altered photo. It didn't happen. They did not play guitar together. I don't exactly... I'm assuming that John Lennon would not have thought that Che Guevara was a nice person.
No, he would not. It's interesting, if you read John Lennon's actual take on politics, he was not a crazy Marxist. He was not a crazy leftist. He was a revolutionary at a time when there were things that needed protesting against, but no, he was much, well, we'll get into that in a bit. But yes, thank you for putting that out there.
I need to call out anybody, just in case anybody mixes that up. But I want to call out Jim, and Joe is on Facebook today, and Robin's on YouTube, and
Very
Jim,
good.
A clone of Jim is on on YouTube as well. But I gotta say thank you, Joe. I actually have one of your caramel apple pops.
Oh yeah, you were working on that today for a bit of a rough throat.
Delicious. Thank you so much.
Great fun.
And your special secret surprise should be non-secret surprise should be coming into the mail soon.
Oh, you've already mailed something out.
Well, we'll see.
It's coming. Okay.
It's coming.
All right. Good. You know, we do a Halloween exchange. If you are not in the Halloween exchange group on Facebook, you do want to join up with that. I think we're running a little bit late in getting things out and posting about it, but we'll get some things going. So if you want to be part of it, get on Facebook and do that. It's also, speaking of which, Happy World Post Day. Now, Amy and I told the story about how when we were first romancing, we actually mailed letters back and forth.
Yes.
I don't think enough people do that anymore. So
I know, it's so fun. It was really a lot of fun.
Yeah, I need to commit to that. I need to get some Halloween cards out. And of course, we will be doing our annual Christmas card exchange. So watch for that on the social networks as well. And finally, it is Happy International Beer and Pizza Day. I don't even know what to do with that. We have beer. I've got some Stella in the fridge.
I think we have some.
We've got frozen pizza.
I'm not eating any of that now.
See, normally I would say, as we often do on Sunday nights, well, we'll get Jet's Pizza. What have I said? We live in an amazing world. We're surrounded by miracles, and one of them is that you can get not only good pizza, you can get good deep dish pizza without having to go to a fancy restaurant or a pub or a bar. We used to have to go to Buddy's Pizzeria at 6 Mile and Conant in Detroit in order to get decent deep dish pizza. Nowadays, we've got Jet's Pizza in Michigan. Good stuff. But, yeah, no, Amy, you're not doing pizza right now, are you? No, you are on a Mondo crazy, wild, super self-disciplined, awesome 6-week program.
Yes, a diet of sorts.
Yeah,
yes.
It's the no pizza diet. Well, there's a few other exclusions, Jim. But it is International Beer and Pizza Day, so if you've got them, absolutely enjoy them. What are we listening to this week? I've got to say, I thought Yaron Brooks speaking about masculinity and femininity was very good. That was 2 episodes ago.
That was really quite good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny because he said, this is one of these cases where he said everything I would have said. A little bit different, but no, he was right on target. It was very good. So I recommend that.
I really appreciate him emphasizing the role of capitalism in how these, gender roles have changed.
Yes.
And that was a really excellent point. And he delved into that pretty deeply, and I really appreciated that. So
yeah, you should listen to the show, but he does make that point that historically, gender roles were very much defined by the fact that a substantial part of what we do to keep ourselves alive required physical labor and strength and a willingness to fight. And with the Industrial Revolution, and especially since the 20th century, that's just not the case anymore. And it's gotten to where, and he points this out, a lot of people are confused. They're confused about what masculinity and femininity are. And we've done whole episodes on that. Look them up on the YouTubes, or we'll be doing that again because it's a great conversation to have. But he points out, a lot of people don't, and that's why you have these unusual modern phenomenons, and not just the culture war and woke and the way in which transgenderism is being handled. But the flip side of that, the crazies on the, I forget what they used to call themselves, but the manosphere, the men going their own way, and the incels, and people who just, they don't understand anymore what it means to be a man, to be a woman. Think of the insufferable Matt Walsh. I shouldn't even say his name because he's insufferable. Who did a movie recently called, What is a Woman? And he goes out and he, tries gotchas on all these crazy woke college professors who can't answer that question. Well, they can answer the question, but they see it as a trap. And coming from Matt Walsh, of course it is. So great conversation from Yaron Brook on that. I really appreciated it. Again, he said the kind of things I would say, which means he was absolutely right.
Yes. Yes, and today, I just want to say we have a special guest.
We do, except now she looks like she's asleep.
No, come on.
Don't you want to be famous?
I got some delicious water. Want some water? Come on.
The bottle of water is very tempting for her.
She was trying to go at me earlier with my bottle of water, and come on.
Yes, today's show is partly shaped by the fact that we are dog sitting this week.
There she is.
We've got the King Charles Spaniel here in the studio. Is this a beautiful dog or what?
Girl.
I should have put an extra light so we could spotlight her there. But yes, you are beautiful, Mina. Yes, you are. And now you are a star. Now everybody knows your name. Everybody knew her name last night. We were in the graveyard.
Yes, we went to the Redford Cemetery in the graveyard.
This is fun. There's a cemetery in Redford, Michigan, right on the border of Detroit. And it's big and it's old. There are headstones with, passing dates from the early 1800s. And yet there are sections that are still current too. Anyway, there's a part of the cemetery which they haven't laid people to rest yet in. And the Redford Historical Society arranges an annual movie night in the cemetery. So we went to the cemetery. We hung out in the one area where there aren't, but we're surrounded by areas with gravestones. They put up a big screen, almost like a small drive-in theater, but we're sitting on long chairs or on the ground. They've got a few fire pits where people can stay warm because Redford's chilly this time of year. And we watched Ghostbusters with Mina, with the Prince Charles Spaniel.
The original Ghostbusters.
Ghostbusters.
Mina was the belle of the ball. I dressed her up in a beautiful vampire cape, quite scary. Mm-hmm. And everybody just loved her, and she got a lot of cuddles and a lot of pets from people. She even got a one of the guests there gave her like a little bow tie clip for her collar.
Yeah, one of the vendors.
Yeah.
Gave her a free item because she was so cute.
It was adorable.
Very sweet.
But yeah, Mina is she's a little... she's an animated stuffed animal.
She is. She's beyond adorable. Is she even real?
I don't even know if she's real. She is, but yeah.
So real quick, in terms of what we're listening to this week, one of the things I did on my weekday shows, I did an episode with James Valiant called Should You Even Be Happy? Where we talked about emotional shoulds, and putting shoulds on emotions is actually irrational. You put shoulds on behaviors and things you should do and think about, but feelings don't work that way. Good show, link in the show notes. I thought it was pretty cool. But I also did a follow-up to last week's 5 Minutes with Robert and Amy Nasir. You might remember if you were here last week. I'm sure you remember. I'm sure you've all been talking about it. We did an episode called Love Conquers All. And it was pretty sweet. It was pretty nice. I mean, the show was called Love Conquers All. Of course it was nice. Of course it was sweet. But I didn't really justify the proposition. I didn't really address love. What the heck does that even mean? Well, love is good and not love is weak, and so we win. It was a little more than that. But on Thursday, I actually took that topic and wrote it. In other words, I scripted it the way it should have happened last Sunday. So if you heard the show last Sunday and thought, yeah, nice, but he didn't really explain why love conquers all, on Thursday I did. I think that one was worth a listen. I think I justified it. And that's going to relate to what we talk about today. I'll skip the rest of what we're listening to this week, but links are in the show notes to interesting things you can listen to and hear about. But one of them is Rick Beato, who's a great presenter on music appreciation, music theory, all things music. He did an episode a year or two ago called Why Losing John Lennon Changed Me.
Aww.
Yes. And Rick Beato is the kind of guy you want to hear talk about that kind of thing.
Yeah, Rick Beato, by the way, is just really fun to watch and listen to.
He is.
You got to watch him, not just listen to him. He's really, really engaging. Even if you don't know any music theory whatsoever, it's really good.
I agree. Well, on Friday I put up, now you know, every morning I put up an inspirational Twitter post along with a photograph of my alarm clock to show, yes, I am waking up before 6 o'clock every morning to start my day in the very best of ways. And I will post a quote, an affirmation, an aphorism, something to help remind you to be your best first thing in the morning. And on Friday morning, I put up a Twitter post, and the quote this time was from Yoko Ono, who said, smile in the mirror. Do that every morning, and you'll start to see a big difference in your life. Unquote Yoko Ono. Mel Robbins recently started the high five program, and what she recommends is every time you see your mirror, high five yourself. Congratulate yourself for being the awesome you are, and you can think of specific things that you're high fiving yourself for. Give it content, but the rule is when you see a mirror, high five yourself. So well before that, Yoko Ono said, smile in the mirror. Do that every morning and you'll start to see a big difference in you. So I put that on Twitter. And then I cross-posted it to Facebook. And maybe that was the mistake, was cross-posting it to Facebook. Maybe I should not have done that little bit. Because it's just too easy. It's too easy with Yoko Ono. Most of the reactions were good, but since it's Yoko Ono, I also received the usual nonsense. A surprising number of people who wrote, for example, oh, Yoko Ono killed the Beatles.
Oh, gosh.
And they misspelled Beatles. They spelled it like the bugs, so maybe that was supposed to be a pun, like she was in the studio killing bugs. Because somebody else said, well, she was smiling when she broke up the Beatles. You know, smile in the mirror, smile in the mirror every morning.
Well, everybody has an opinion on that because the Beatles are so well loved, and
yes,
it was. I think it was more of a. I think maybe even before Yoko Ono came along, that they've been together for how many years? I mean. So they had to move on, I think. It's
just silly to think that Yoko Ono broke up the Beatles. The Beatles, I mean, one by one, the Beatles quit well before the band ever broke up.
Yeah.
Each in their own turn when they were recording the album called The Beatles, which we think of as the White Album. You know, the first two tracks on that album, Paul McCartney is the drummer. Mm-hmm. Back in the USSR in Dear Prudence, because Ringo walked out. He left, and he left for a couple of weeks before they sweet-talked him and coaxed him back into the band. Yeah. During the sessions for Get Back, or Let It Be, depending on which version of the album you buy, George Harrison quit, and that is documented in the film documentary Get Back.
Yeah.
Paul McCartney officially was the first one to leave the band and make a press announcement, but John Lennon had already said that he was ending the band. Everybody in the band knew he wasn't going to be sticking around. So to say that Yoko Ono killed the Beatles is inaccurate.
Stephen on YouTube, he says, why did Ringo leave? He was probably older and more mature, and he got fed up.
Yeah, that was often the case. He was older than the other guys in the band. He had, I think, 3 years on John Lennon, and John Lennon was the next oldest. I forget the exact reason why he left.
But if you watch
not hard to find it.
If you watch the documentary Get Back, which I didn't get entirely, I think I watched 2 episodes out of it, and oh my gosh, Ringo just looks like he is done. especially for the Let It Be album, and you'll see this if you watch the documentary. A lot of the material was written in the studio. Prior to that, they had written songs. You go home, you write songs. You sit in your living room or you sit at a piano and you write a song, and then you show up at the studio. Studio time's expensive,
Studio time is very, I don't know if you've recorded in a music studio before. I haven't. It was, the attic studio of a music store, but it's expensive. So when you're starting out, you don't waste time in the studio. You write the songs, and by the time you show up, you're ready to perform. Well, by the end of their career, the Beatles were so rich, so famous, and so able to get whatever they wanted. They were composing in the studio. Now, that might not sound that strange, but watch the documentary, and as Amy said, you just see Ringo sitting there, and the guys are working. Paul and John are working out vocal harmonies for I've Got a Feeling. And there's just nothing for Ringo to do.
Ringo did not have a feeling.
He did not have a feeling. And you see the look on his face. He's not angry. He's just bored as hell, just sitting at the drum kit smoking a cigarette. And then they'll ask him to play a song for the 25th time as they're still working out parts. And he does it flawlessly. Ringo is such an underrated drummer. He's so good that, even when he's obviously bored and annoyed, he just gives a great performance every time. So, yeah, I don't know exactly why Ringo walked out, but I know he had reasons to.
Yeah.
There were getting to be times when it's also why George left. Paul was getting to be very critical and a bit of a band leader, taking on the frontman role. It's funny because they tolerated that from John because he was very experienced and he was the older man, not counting Ringo. But from Paul, they didn't like his...
just watching the documentary, Paul just kind of saunters in, and he's like, yeah, I got an idea for you guys, if you're good enough for it. I mean, that was his attitude. It was kind of obnoxious in a way. I mean, charming in the way that Paul McCartney is, but...
Part of the problem with being a genius is people think you're acting like some kind of genius. So on my Facebook thread, on the social media, I wrote, to all the silly naysayers, I know, easy target, and it's all in fun. I mean, heck, think of the Bare Naked Ladies song, Be My Yoko Ono. But the great thing about the Bare Naked Ladies song is it was a loving tribute.
Yeah.
It really was.
Yeah.
As silly as it was. Anyway, I wrote, whatever you think of her art and her views, Yoko Ono was the woman who made John Lennon happy for the last 10 years of his all too short life. And that is saying something.
Yeah, that's true.
I suspect that their love story would have been clearly, undeniably epic had a maniac not ended it prematurely.
Yep. That maniac was not Yoko Ono. That was the guy who shot John Lennon.
No.
So Ian on YouTube here, he said Ringo needed an iPhone so he could watch YouTube videos while waiting.
He could. He could have been watching shows like this, yeah.
And yes, and I agree with you. So when Ian says when he records music, it's very hard to keep up the enthusiasm for the multiple takes of songs. Yeah, we've been there.
Yeah. Well, I posted a video earlier, just before the show, and it's me playing Imagine. And it's not very good, but it's because I don't have the patience to do 25 takes and make it perfect. So what you see is what you get.
Here's a good question from Steven on YouTube. He says, were the Beatles the best ever? Anyone produce as much as they did?
Yes. They were the best ever.
Well.
But, then you can look at the Rolling Stones and say the Stones did what the Beatles did, but they didn't break up.
True.
So, Led Zeppelin only had 10 years, but 11 years, 12 if you count the little bit in 68. But what they did, nobody else did it. Would you have had hard rock without Led Zeppelin? Well, you had Deep Purple. It's hard to say. My answer to that kind of question is always when it rises to that level of excellence, the question doesn't really mean anything. It's very, how do you compare Rachmaninoff to Tchaikovsky? It's just two variants of greatness. And the Beatles were unquestionably among the greatest.
Yep.
In that thread on Facebook, a commenter had written, I often think the love the man must have had for her while making the music he made while he loved her. His solo stuff is brilliant. And then somebody replied to his comment, and that's what I want to talk about. because the reply that he received from a mutual friend, he was a woman-beating, narcissistic a-hole.
John Lennon?
John Lennon. And the response from that original commenter was, he was abandoned by his mother and was famous young. Not an excuse, but none of that changes the quality of his music or his brilliance as a musician. And then it gets interesting because the commenter goes on. He says, let me be more clear. Thomas Jefferson had a sexual relationship with a 14-year-old, or 16 at best, a slave who was related to and possibly resembled his dead wife. We're not far off from medieval culture. Underage sex, domestic violence, etc. are primitive behaviors that met no real challenge until the 20th century. If we're being honest, not really until the last couple decades of it. There will be hideous irrationalities on the vine alongside the grapes for a long time to come. If we dismiss the rational values to dam the misgrowth, well, we should probably just give up on ever drinking the wine now, because it won't be there later. I thought that was pretty damn good. And I asked the commenter for permission to read that comment on the air, and so that's why you get it. You know, when we think of a favorite teacher, a mentor, if we enjoy contemplating a favorite singer, or a dancer, or composer, or a sports figure, or a movie star, when we admire a great ancient philosopher, or a great historical leader, or our founding fathers, we know that they had weaknesses and qualities of character we do not admire, and in another context might even condemn. So does that mean heroes are out? Does that mean we should revere nothing, admire nothing, worship nothing, honor nothing?
We could admire mediocrity. People who have no courage and who don't actually take any risks. No thanks.
Yep.
No thank you.
Now I know some people out there are thinking, no, we should find better heroes.
Well, you can do that too.
Well, you find me those heroes without flaws. But this brings me to the topic of friendships.
Oh.
Friendships. Which I will address by first considering the moral requirement to leave an 8 when a 9 comes along. Some of you may have seen this. I've posted it just before the show. The moral requirement to leave, you know what I mean by an 8? You know what I mean by a 9? This is the way the kids talk. I'm kidding. This is the way I talked when I was... This is the way everybody talks at some point. Most people don't take this stuff seriously. Most of us use these terms ironically, but she's a real 10. If you don't think people actually use that kind of language, you've never seen Bo Derek in the film 10 with Dudley Moore. A charming film, although the premise is very cringeworthy. But the moral requirement, it's a moral requirement. Virtue requires that you leave an 8 when a 9 comes along. Well, what? It sounds silly, except I know to some people it doesn't, and they have asserted this. I have met people who take the idea that, a quote from Atlas Shrugged, the first precondition of self-esteem is that radiant selfishness of soul which desires the best in all things, in values of matter and spirit. Unquote. And I've met the kind of people who take that to mean that in relationships, in friendships, in romance, it's reasonable and even morally obligatory to always trade up when the opportunity presents itself. It would be irrational not to, right? And this notion isn't entirely without merit. You certainly deserve to be with the very best people you can find and who are interested in being with you. But judging somebody to be a 10 and then consequently making a romance happen, that's not how values, nor romance, nor life works. So what's that got to do with heroes, or imagination, or beer and pizza, or John Lennon's birthday? Per my Thursday show on Love Conquers All, we're here to enjoy this life, to enjoy values, to produce and create and celebrate and dance and play and sing and live. And that means that we are right to focus on what our peers and our friends and our lovers and our heroes produce and create. And we focus on that more than we focus on flaws or failings, moral or otherwise. You know, there's a point at which a friend, a coworker, a man of accomplishment does become poison, morally reprehensible, in a way that undercuts not only his achievements, but our appreciation and admiration for his achievements. There is a point where that happens. But just as we are here on earth to live and not just to not die, so too we are here to celebrate achievements and not to focus on failings. Now here's a tricky bit. Graciousness is a value.
Mina,
why are you growling at me?
She's laying over here snoring.
Oh, okay. I know when I say things like graciousness is a value, I've got a few people growling out there. I just didn't expect it from the Poochie.
She's like snoring.
All right, I'll speed it up because somebody's obviously bored over here, little poodle. Graciousness is a value, so when your admiration for someone is challenged by those who see the hero's flaws as a reason to attack, because it's an attack on their values, it is worth handling that situation with mastery. Imagine you're a woman. Some of you are. If a woman reminds you that John Lennon mistreated the women in his life, or say that you're a black man or a black woman who reminds you that Thomas Jefferson slept with the teenaged Sally Hemings, a slave he owned, there is no reason for you as an admirer of Thomas Jefferson, like I am, to become defensive. Explain yourself if you like. And if there's a need, if there's any reason to. But if your self-esteem is intact, there should not be any feeling like I've got to defend myself. If we think people should be gracious in handling our admiration for our heroes, we should be at least that much so in responding to them. It's very easy and fairly gracious to say, I'm sorry you feel that way. And then to let it go and not continue to hammer home, but you should like this person because I have reason. No.
I mean, you could say, I'm sorry you don't see any inspiration in the better side of this. And you also, maybe in certain contexts, you don't see the nuance of this person's life and the circumstances.
Maybe, but I'd be careful about that because it implies that there's something wrong with that person's value hierarchy. How dare you care more about that he was a slave owner than that he was the founder of a country that eventually abolished slavery, and his ideas are part of the reason. I'd be a little bit careful about that because their value hierarchy may be valid even though it differs from mine. And they're just never going to be able to look at Thomas Jefferson and say, as much as there are aspects I don't admire, what he did was more important than any of that.
I get that. I
Yeah.
get that. But that just you're painting a picture where you're basically cutting the conversation off entirely at that point and saying we're in an impasse and we can't really talk about the subject anymore.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is going to happen. That is a thing that happens. You're right. You could probably try to go further with it. But when we expect that people are more respectful of our values, we need to be able to do the same in turn.
Mm-hmm. So, okay. So far we've talked about people, like John Lennon, who had domestic abuse issues and anger issues, and but then had I think that was with regard to Julian Lennon's mother, right?
That's how the story goes.
Yeah, right.
But he had that with Yoko, too. For all that they had a great love story, there was the Lost Weekend.
Oh, that's right.
Which wasn't just a weekend, it was most of a year, where John Lennon left New York, went and lived out on the West Coast, spent a year including a relationship with his, was it the secretary, somebody associated with the record company.
Right.
And then eventually returned back to the East Coast and waited basically to see if Yoko Ono was going to forgive him.
Yeah.
So yes, mixed cases for sure.
Yeah, and when you're talking about, for instance, optional values of, you can say, I don't like the Beatles because John Lennon was a part of the Beatles and I didn't like his personal life and I didn't like the fact that he was abusive and that was wrong and he should have served jail time or whatever it was. It's an optional value, and there's no moral judgment in saying, how dare you not like the Beatles.
Right.
Mina, how dare you not like the Beatles?
And you've got to draw a line somewhere, and I draw the line at wearing Che Guevara t-shirts.
Right. Yeah.
My favorite Marx and Lennon are Groucho Marx and John Lennon.
Yeah, but I would say this. With regard to Thomas Edison and the Founding Fathers,
yes,
I think that I think it is important to say. I think that is less of an optional value. In terms of respecting the concepts of individual rights and limited government and natural law and all of the ideas of the Enlightenment that the founders advocated for and risked their lives for. I think it's important to be able to say, yes, I do understand those ideas and I recognize their importance, for else slavery would never be abolished. But yeah, I could certainly understand if somebody did not want to go to Monticello or Mount Vernon or spend money there or have anything to do with it. Yeah, I could certainly see that.
Yes. And the explanation for why you would still admire Thomas Jefferson or George Washington despite the slavery issue is a complicated one. And sometimes that get-together that you're at, that 5 minutes you have to talk with somebody, it's not going to be enough to justify your appraisal. Now, you might think, well, why do I need to be gracious? Why do I always have to be the bigger man? And the answer is you do that for your own sake. You're not the bigger, better man. You're not more gracious as a sacrifice.
Now, so relating the concepts of trying to parse out the good stuff from heroes that are flawed.
Yes.
And the idea of it's morally obligatory to leave your rated 8 lover or whoever, yes, or friend, yes, and to go for a rated 9 or a higher, level up kind of thing. And that's and if you're wrong to yourself, or you're not being selfish if you don't do that, you've got a relationship with number 8 already. You already have whatever time invested. I mean, have you been dating 3 days? Have you been dating a year? So you're going to have a lot invested. You know the person, and as Steve here on Facebook says, how will you know the person that comes along, after a year of having a relationship with, number 8, that this number 9 really truly is a number 9?
Oh, that's easy. I can answer that one.
Okay.
Because people who use numbers like 8 and 9 to judge men or women, they're judging entirely on looks. Trust me, there is nothing deeper than that going on in the mind of a person who labels people and judges people in that way.
It's like is this horse an 8 or a 9? I don't know. Look at his teeth.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you've checked out her teeth, you pretty much know the whole story.
Yeah, well, how's her dental hygiene? Let me base this on that.
Yeah, it's a great point you bring up, because what we now need to do is double back to celebrities. And we start with friends and family. You judge friends and family in context. It's a failure mode of friendships. I see this time and again where we build a friendship and we build it up and we add more values and we add more experiences. And some of those kind of they happen so much. The relationship we have, the times we've gone out together, the dinners that we've shared, the experiences, the 1,000 of conversations that we've had, that rather than build the relationship up and make us realize how valuable this person is, sometimes that stuff gets taken for granted. And I'm sure some of you will recognize this, especially older folks, but really anyone. And then that friend does something that we disagree with. And something substantial, something that has, for example, a bit of a moral element to it. They actually do something bad. They lie to us, they cheat, they do something in their personal world that is dishonorable. And we let the friendship go. We let that become a deal breaker. As if everything else, including all of the virtues and all of the values that have come from that friendship, don't matter. They don't measure up. Because that's all in the past. We take that for granted. And I've seen this, I'm old enough now, I've seen it time and time again in friends and family and in my own personal life, that we don't let that bank account, that vault full of values that friend has built up, compensate for that one or two recent things that then cause us to end the relationship and sometimes out and out condemn the person. And that's not rational. That's not reality-based. I understand why it happens, and sometimes the terrible thing that person does is so bad the relationship has to end. Just like you wouldn't stay friends with Che Guevara, but you might stay friends with John Lennon. Mm-hmm. But context is everything.
Yes.
And that is a mistake that we make. And we do that sometimes in romantic relationships, when really a romance should be the same way. The reason why if a 9 comes along and you're already with an 8, the 9 can't have you, is because what you have built up with the 8, I'm using these labels a little tongue-in-cheek, but take it seriously for a moment. You meet an 8, and if you are any kind of a partner, within a month or a year, that 8 will become a 10. Mm-hmm. And so will you. It's why when you meet people, and I mean ordinary, I don't mean like super handsome and beautiful people like Amy and I, but when you meet ordinary people and they fall in love, and you look at them and you think they're not ugly, but they're not the most attractive people I've ever met. And yet they look at each other like they are. Mm-hmm. And they talk about each other. I'm with the most handsome man. I'm with the most beautiful woman I've ever met. We're getting married this year, and I'm so happy to be with the most handsome man in the world. And they're not exaggerating. They're not lying. there may be a little bit of hyperbole, and they still know when they look at models or movie stars, oh yeah, that person's more attractive than I am. They don't usually think of it in terms of that person's more attractive than my partner. And the reason is because they're in love, and their partner's a 10. And in a great relationship, they look in the mirror and say, God, I'm a 10 too. Context is everything.
Yeah, Robin on YouTube here, he says, the more you admire someone's personality, the more attractive they become. And Joe on Facebook, she says, so very true, the non-superficial value grows.
So, yeah. And Jim Ashley is reminding us of one of John Lennon's many crimes, the song Revolution No. 9 from the White Album. And you're right. It's hard not to hold that against John Lennon.
It's number 8, and then there's number 9. There's number 9.
John Lennon was not perfect.
Thank you for tying all that in, Jim.
John Lennon is one of those people where you could not have the greatness of John Lennon without the quirkiness of John Lennon. He wasn't going to be just a standard brilliant but brill-building type, songwriter. He wasn't going to be a Burt Bacharach. He wasn't going to be a Carole King. You weren't going to get anything brilliant out of John Lennon if you made him normal. And some artists are like that. Happily, he lived past the age of 27. Think about some of the greats in the 27 Club. Who died at the age of 27 because the same kind of passion and fire, not tempered by reason. And in some of these people's cases, if it had been, you wouldn't have got what you got out of a Jimi Hendrix or a Janis Joplin or a Kurt Cobain. These people would not have been who they were.
Out of all the Beatles, in terms of their personal lives, I think we probably respect George Harrison the most.
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, he had some real depth and some goodness about him that was very solid,
yes,
but also very brilliant.
I mean, as an artist, it's kind of hard not to put Paul McCartney on the top, given what he has done with 80 years.
Yeah.
But personally, George Harrison will always resonate the most with me.
Yeah.
It's my kind of guy.
Yeah, I used to be a big fan of Paul McCartney, and I still am. But yeah, George Harrison is really, I think, what he did for the production of Life of Brian, the Monty Python movie, and the way that he saved that. It was not going to be produced until he came along and made sure that it happened. If you haven't seen Life of Brian, please do. But yeah, I think in the chat here we're all pretty much in agreement that the whole would you give up number 8 for number 9? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, we did a whole episode on the Thursday show, Life on Earth with Robert and Amy Nasir, on copper pot objectivism, and the lesson of that sequence, which I won't tell, is never give up what you value, even if you can't in the moment fully explain it. As long as you know that it's not completely irrational. It came up again in the context of Ayn Rand, the essay, My 30 Years with Ayn Rand, which Leonard Peikoff gave as a speech at the Fordall Forum, and he tells a story about when Atlas Shrugged was finally published, and the publishing houses are all fighting over to get it, and Ayn Rand's walking down the streets of New York City. And she says to Leonard Peikoff, never give up what you want most in life.
The struggle is worth it.
Now, the struggle is worth what?
What you what you can ultimately achieve, what the values that you choose, and actually achieving those values to the extent that you can.
But what is the it? What's the payoff? What's the reward of the struggle?
Going as far as you can with achieving a particular value. A value that you're very passionate about.
Yes.
Yeah.
That passion, that feeling of ability, achievement, self-esteem, and just the love of this life on earth. The reason why you can agree with somebody that Thomas Jefferson did things he shouldn't have done, and yet also go to Monticello and admire this man, The reason why you can read, the biography of Cynthia Lennon and think what a shame that some of those things happened, and yet love and respect John Lennon. The reason why you should stand by your friends, and so long as you still call them your friends and are not ready to give up on them, you will be loyal. The reason why you should continue to build a relationship and never stop putting effort into it is because life is an end in itself, because you are living for that sense of, yeah, if I die tomorrow, this was worth it. So my Post-it note for the week says, keep your friends close.
Period.
We all know the expression, keep your friends close and your enemies closer, which I've quoted before.
Yeah.
I've explained to people when people will say, for example, on Facebook or Twitter, why do you follow this terrible person? Why are you friends, Facebook friends, with this terrible person? And I've explained before that there are people that are, I don't know if I'd call them enemies, but they're definitely not my people. But I do still keep an eye on them, having been friends with them in the past. So yes, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. But my Post-it note for the week just reminds me, keep your friends close. Don't take these people for granted. And if something goes awry between you, give them space, take a time out, give every consideration of the situation, but don't give up on them unless you have a really compelling reason to just let them go their own way. And then if it really was a friendship of substance and merit, let them go their own way. We all know the idea of, especially online, people will leave a conversation or a group chat and they feel compelled to slam the door behind them. Make a big speech. I'm leaving this group. You people are all irrational and I need to denounce you. And it's one thing to say, I don't agree with what's going on here. I'm leaving. But that slamming of the door, what a waste. What a waste of energy. What a waste of your own spiritual energy. So yes, keep your friends close.
Yeah. Yes, and especially this time coming out of the pandemic, people that you haven't seen or talked to in quite a while, get back with them and say hello to them, check in with them. It doesn't have to be a big commitment, but eventually, go out with them and be in the world. And yeah, so we've got some recommendations here.
Yes.
Let's see, Jim's favorite songs by the Beatles are You've Got to Hide Your Love Away, Yellow Submarine, Penny Lane, and The Long and Winding Road.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, those are all very charming, except for the last one, which is very heartfelt. All good selections.
Yeah, I'd have to say that I don't have a particular one song of... Actually, I kind of... well, anytime I play drums or... I don't think I've actually played bass on a Beatles song, but I really do like playing drums on Beatles songs. But I like actually just to listen to the entire album of Abbey Road. That's one of those albums that was sort of hard to separate for me in terms of, what songs I like the best from it. I think the whole album is amazing to listen to in its entirety. And so I'll say that.
Yeah, Abbey Road. It's funny because when the Beatles would talk about individually after the fact what drove them most crazy about Paul McCartney, everybody hated recording Maxwell's Silver Hammer, and that song and Octopus's Garden to an extent are kind of disposable on that album, but the whole rest of the album is brilliant. Side 2, and especially after the first two songs. Here Comes the Sun and Sun King. The medley that follows through the end of the album is just brilliant. And you've got to give George Martin a ton of credit for that, the producer, because most of those songs were originally produced as individual songs. And some of them were so short, they were just snippets, and they got the idea to make a medley out of them instead. And it just works beautifully the way that once they decided that's what they were going to do. So good. So very good.
Emily on YouTube, she says, Dear Prudence is her favorite song.
That's a good choice.
Great song. Actually, I mean, really, there is one song, and I don't know what album it was from, but it's "Happiness is a Warm Gun."
Same album as Dear Prudence.
Is it? Oh, okay. Which album was that?
The White Album, the Beatles.
Okay, the White. Yeah, got it.
Yep.
Yeah, I like "Happiness is a Warm Gun," and I like playing drums on that. I think we've done that before, and it's really fun to play.
It's a quirky song too, because that one's also a suite. It's got several sections, and Yoko Ono makes an appearance in the lyrics of that song.
Monica says, "Hey, I like Hey Dude," and
Hey
I'm
Dude.
assuming she means Hey Jude.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of whether it's rock stars or political figures or Renaissance men or women, you can always debate people's faults and flaws, but it's really important to define in your own mind what ideas and what actions and what accomplishments you like in a person.
Yes.
Even if they are, they ended up being not good people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you find yourself tempted to be the spoiler, to be the ruiner, to be the one who says, "Oh, you admire that person? Well, don't you know that there may be reason to share that kind of information when somebody tells you, I really like Mick Jagger. I love the Rolling Stones." Ask yourself, why are you sharing that information? And do you really want to share it? And you can. You have that right. Nobody's stopping you.
So like in The Wedding Singer, where the guy's hair is like this, and he's like, "I really, really love the flock of seagulls. Do you really like the flock of seagulls?" and the guy's character, Adam Sandler's character, he's like, I can see that you do. With his hair all funny.
Yes.
Yeah, but I mean that's something. I think in an objectivist culture, if you can call it that, that's been one thing that people go up to. Do you like Rush? Do you like Do you like Yes? Do you like and then some people will say one of our friends. He's like, "Well, I don't like any of those objectivist-y rock bands. I like The Who." And I'm like, "Oh, is Yes an objectivist-y rock band?"
No. God, no.
No. But yeah, it's fun though. It's they're optional values, and I've certainly learned from other people in terms of what they like with movies and music and art, and and once you get older, you can kind of get a little stale with the things that you previously really liked.
Yep.
And you're going to look for new values, which is great.
And do that.
Yeah.
Do that thing. So I called the episode Imagine That because, of course, imagine another way of going about it. But also, when I started playing Imagine on the piano and then decided to add the 6-string bass to it, I thought of the bass player Emilio Martinez, who I'm friends with on Facebook. You should follow him. He's it's interesting because he's a technology salesman who's also a bass player. And when Yngwie Malmsteen goes on the road, he's the bass player. It's super cool. But when he tours with Yngwie, he always plays 6-string bass. So recording a version of Imagine for me was just an excuse to get out the 6-string bass and play around with it because I had seen some of Emilio's posts.
Nice.
And that is how that silly little video happened.
Linda says hi. She's flying right now.
Linda is in an airplane. So if you go to cordair.com and buy something, she will have more work to do when she gets home.
Yes.
And she won't complain. She loves her work.
Yes, she does.
I know a lot of us think, "Oh, you give her more work to do. Leave her alone." No. This is somebody who loves her work. If you're familiar with cordair.com, you know why. If not, go take a look. It will make your heart beat.
John Wass has yet another beautiful painting out there, not for sale. I think this was a commission painting.
Yes.
Of a married couple, I believe. But man, you got to go see it.
Yeah,
you got to go see it.
And look at John's work at cordair.com.
It's more real than real. It's more luscious than lusciousness. I mean, it's just He has a real knack for
and you might have to give it a
bringing
minute.
things out.
You might have to give it a minute, because sometimes when you see John's, not his still lifes, but his portraiture, sometimes it looks photorealistic, and you think, oh, what do they, like, paint a photograph?
So, you're scrolling on Facebook, and you kind of like, oh, that's a nice photo, and then you look, oh, wait, that's not.
Yeah, my advice is take a minute and really drink it in.
Yeah.
And you will see, oh, no, that's not that at all. No, it's magnificent. So good stuff. And again, when a song like Imagine pops in your head and you start playing it on the piano, and then you think, oh, wait a minute. He talks about imagine no possessions. He's against property rights. No. But even if you read it that way, if you're going to say that I need to only listen to music that has no lyrics that I object to, including, treating women badly or treating values irrationally or whatever the thing is, you got to draw a line somewhere.
Well, Jim here, he mentions the lyric, carrying pictures of Chairman Mao, don't you know that you can count me out?
Yes, John Lennon was not as crazy starry-eyed.
About dictators.
He was an idealist, but when it comes to politics,
right,
he was not as bad as a lot of people make him out to be. And I could say more about that, but I'm going to leave it there. I wouldn't be playing a song like Imagine on the Facebooks. I won't put it on YouTube because I'll get a copyright strike from them.
Yeah.
If I thought that it was a vicious piece of music, and if I know it's not a vicious piece of music, you can take it on faith from me. Or, if you want, you can judge for yourself, use your own first-handed thinking. But either way, I imagine that you are going to have an outstanding week. I know that I thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. Ran a little long today, and since you're still in the chat, that tells me you are fine, devoted, outstanding people, and we love you for it. Thank you for joining us. As always, show notes are posted right in the description of the YouTube video. They're already there. I'll add them to the Facebook version as well with links to some of the fun stuff we talked about, including the videos we did this week, the Yarenbrook thing, all of that. If you want to support the show, you know what to do. Give it a like on YouTube. Give it a share. Put it someplace where somebody else will see it, and they'll be like, oh, what are these two talking about? And they will check it out. And if you want to support the show directly, go to robertnasir.com. You'll see a link to Patreon. You could sign up to give us a couple dollars every month. Believe me, it will make all the difference. We're a little low now. Somebody had to leave again because they were running short on cash. You could be the one who fills that back in and, raises us back up.
Please, yes.
If you're not a monthly kind of person, or if you just don't use Patreon, there's also a link to PayPal.com/Robert Nasir. You click that and you can send us a one-time bit of love, cup of coffee, anything you're up for. Very much appreciated.
The fact is that we need your support. We need your support. Mina here needs your support.
Yes. How are we supposed to keep our dog sitting business going without the infusion of... No, seriously, though, thank you to those of you who do support the show. That really does mean a lot to us. And if anybody else wants to, robertnasir.com. Also, you can leave in the chat or on the Facebook group suggestions for future episodes. Anything you would like to hear us talk about, especially if there's something you want to hear us talk about, so you can comment about it in the chat. And with that said, we wish you success and flourishing. We wish you an outstanding week, full of love, full of imagination, if you will, and I know you will. And as always, we wish you love.